everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we are continuing with the book of Daniel. Today we're covering chapter 5. So, in a couple chapters, we're going to come across a particular topic that is really popular within um, eschatological circles, meaning Christians of other faiths as well as members of the church that are really interested in the second coming. There's a particular topic that's become pretty popular starting within our church, from what I can tell, in the year 2020. And in fact, I myself started to believe that until I researched it. I thought, oh, well, maybe there's something that I missed in my studies of the scriptures, and the way it was presented was very authoritative, and I was just like, oh, I guess I missed that, or I didn't study hard enough. But no, that wasn't the case. Um, so one thing that I would encourage you to do in preparation for when we get to chapter 9 is as I was thinking about it today, I was like, I need to put this on my recommended videos playlist before I forget about it and get ready for that video. This is from a channel called Feathered Drop. Is there biblical evidence for a 7-year tribulation? This person is not a member of our church, but the way that he talks about this idea of the 70 weeks of Daniel and 7-year tribulation period and all this stuff, he explains it very, 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 very well, better than I ever could. Just very concise, very clear. So I would encourage you to watch this, and also be aware that I have a couple playlists that you can refer to. One is called the Book of Daniel, which includes this series that we're doing chapter by chapter, but also all the many, many other videos I've already done that touch on the Book of Daniel. So far, 33 videos. And then I have one specifically for the concept of a 7-year tribulation. This is something that's never been taught by our church. You can't find it anywhere in any church material. No general authority or even general officer of the church has taught this, but there's a lot of people that are accepting this and importing it from the greater Christian world. So you can look at this. This video has 14, or this playlist has 14 videos. And then you may recall the last video that we did was Daniel chapter 4, which went along very nicely with this other thing that recently happened, King Charles III. King Charles III's coronation, because this chapter had a lot to do with, well, basically everything to do with Nebuchadnezzar going crazy, his downfall, and stuff like that. And there was a lot of symbolism in here that seemed to show up in the coronation of King Charles III. So now we're getting that transition between Nebuchadnezzar and the next king, which we're going to look at the student manual like we always do. It has something to say about this next king, Belshazzar. But anyway, let's get into it. Oh, and before we do, here's the update on the Flood the Earth challenge, or Sharing of the Book of Mormon challenge. 5,806 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. Now, since yesterday, there haven't been any new people that have joined the challenge, which is typically not the case. We'd have to go back to April 28th to see another day like that when no one joined the challenge. So hopefully someone today will join and then let me know that you shared the Book of Mormon. 49 contacts with the missionaries and 17 baptisms. So great job, everybody. Keep it up. Okay, so let's get into it. First, we read the chapter, then we see what the Institute student manual says. Chapter 5. Belshazzar and his revelers drink from the vessels of the temple. A hand writes upon the wall, telling Belshazzar's downfall. Daniel interprets the words and reproves the king for pride and idolatry. That night, Babylon is conquered. So this is interesting because when you think about it, I didn't think to pull this up. LDS Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Is that how did I spell it right? No. I always mess up on that. Let's go to images. Let's look at this. So it's interesting because in just a few chapters, those few chapters that we've already read have already covered this portion of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the Babylonian Empire. Very short when you compare that to, for example, the Roman Empire, which was much, much longer, just as a contrast. So we're getting into the transition between the gold head and the breast and arms of silver, the Medians and the Persians. All right, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Again, just so it's crystal clear, and I just want to make sure, especially for those that don't speak English, that a lot of times I repeat myself or um, define words that you probably know. I just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what's happening, just in case you've ever wondered why do you keep repeating things or dumbing things down. And that's another thing. Everyone's on different levels. I want to make sure that anybody that comes across this channel can completely understand what's being said. It's just crystal clear. So again, Belshazzar, according to the scriptural narrative, is the next king after Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the one that conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, took the vessels of the temple, and then according to the book of Daniel, the way that it reads is Belshazzar is the next king. So king number 2 from the time of the conquering of Israel. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple to the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. So it's almost like his legs are buckling and his knees are going up against each other. The king cried out to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and shew me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. So that's maybe for some people a really big promotion. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit in knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and shewing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts, were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, Now let Daniel be called, and he will shew the interpretation. So Belteshazzar is Daniel's Babylonian name that they named him, not to be confused with this king that we're reading about, Belshazzar, although they sound similar. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have heard of thee, and the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not shew the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom uh, whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from this kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts. This is recalling the last chapter, the craziness that came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. So, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, which is a really weird idea. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though knowest all this, or though thou knewest all this. So I guess that's like a way of saying you should have known better. You should have learned from what happened to your father. But has lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and those who are all thy ways hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, or upharsin, or upharsin. I don't know. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, and that's repeated twice, because it goes many, many. So it's like saying, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. No, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. That's not how you want the balances to go. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Midian took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. In case you don't know, if you don't speak English or whatever, a score is 20 years, so it's 60 years because 20 times 3, so 60 years plus 2 years, 62 years old. Which I don't understand why it can't just be said like that, but whatever. Scores. Um, okay, so that whole thing didn't last very long. The time of the Babylonians, um, the time in which they had the Jews in captivity, and I'm talking relative to the length of other empires or other occupations and stuff like that. So let's look and see what it says in the Institute manual. Again, this is on the website. You can always go there and consult this and many, many other texts and study helps on the church website if you have a question about whatever, a scripture or whatever. Okay, excuse me. So starting with verse 1, Belshazzar the king. Many scholars have questioned the validity of the statement that Belshazzar was a king in Babylon because Belshazzar never reigned as sole king and is never designated as king or Sharu in the cuneiform inscriptions. Furthermore, it is maintained that there is no evidence to show that Belshazzar ever ruled upon the throne as a subordinate to Nabonidus, his father. In reply to these charges, we may note, first of all, that the Aramaic word Malka, king, and by the way, that's similar to the Hebrew word Melech, which is king, but okay, Aramaic Malka, which is a related language. So the Aramaic word Malka, king, need not have the connotation of a monarch or sole king. Okay, so you get what it's saying, Mala or Malka. It doesn't have to absolutely be the sole king. So, whatever. Maybe he was in a position of very, very high authority. Maybe might as well have been king. I don't know. Furthermore, one of the cuneiform documents expressly states that Nabonidus entrusted the kingship to Belshazzar. In all probability, there was a corregency between Nabonidus and Belshazzar, in which Belshazzar occupied a subordinate position. Since, however, he was the man upon the throne with whom Israel had to do, he is designated king in the book of Daniel. No valid objection can be raised against this usage. So, from an Israel point of view, if he was over the Israelites, then there you go. They would view him as the king that had to do with them. Verse 3, drinking from the vessels of the temple. When the Babylonians overthrew Jerusalem, they carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord. As Keel and Delish noted, during the feast, the Babylonians drank out of the holy vessels of the temple of the God of Israel to glorify their heathen gods in songs of praise. In doing this, they did not only place Jehovah on a perfect level with their gods, Havernick, but raised them above the Lord of heaven, as Daniel, verse 23, charged the king. The carrying away of the temple vessels to Babylon and placing them in the temple of Bel was a sign of the defeat of the god whom these vessels were consecrated. The use of these vessels in the drinking of wine at a festival amid the singing of songs in praise of the gods was accordingly a celebrating of these gods as victorious over the God of Israel. Yeah, and you don't really need to be a scholar to get the imagery there. It's like, if that's what you're doing and you're using the sacred things from another culture, you're basically disrespecting them and being like, see, you can't do anything. Look, we're drinking out of your. It's very disrespectful. It says vessels of the temple, altar of incense, gold candlestick, table of shewbread, and Ark of the Covenant. So there's that. Daniel 5:6. What is meant by the phrase, the joints of his loins were loosed? The great fear that came upon the king is described in the Revised Standard Version of the Bible as his limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. I mean, okay, who cares? Whatever. The third ruler in the kingdom, verse 7. The Hebrew word that is translated third ruler means one of three. The promise was that the interpreter of the writing would be made third in authority in the kingdom next to Nabonidus and Belshazzar. The scarlet, sometimes purple, clothing and the chain of gold mentioned in Daniel 5:7 were symbols of rank worn by high officials. Verse 17, let thy gifts be to thyself. Those who function under the influence of the Spirit of God have increased capabilities, not because of their own qualifications, but because of the power of God, which they are privileged to use. They are servants in the Lord's hands who are to bless others and carry out the Lord's will. Daniel knew this and neither deserved nor sought for earthly rewards for his role as an instrument in the hands of God. Daniel 25 through 29. The interpretation of the handwriting on the wall. The handwriting on the wall indicated not only that the Babylonian kingdom would be overthrown, but also the means by which it would be overthrown. Many, or numbered, God has numbered, the days of the kingdom. Tekel, shekel, used both as a coin and as a weight, indicated that Belshazzar was weighed in the balances and found deficient. Perez, division, your kingdom is divided, Perez, and given to the Medes and Persians, Paras. The word Paras would seem to point out that the Persians were the dominant power to whom Babylon would fall. When Daniel read the writing, he read and parson. What? When Daniel read the writing, he read and parson, but in giving the interpretation, he employed the form Perez. We have thus a play upon words in which the basic idea of division is linked with the name of the conqueror. Yeah, okay, so it's just like a, yeah. Okay, verse 29. Why was Daniel rewarded by the king when he prophesied of the king's destruction? Although Belshazzar did not believe that Daniel's God was the only true God, it is likely that he, like other heathens, believed in the gods and in revelations from God. He must have been deeply impressed with Daniel's ability to interpret the writing on the wall because he rewarded him handsomely. Keel and Delish suggested another possible reason. Quote, Belshazzar perhaps scarcely believed the threatened judgment from God to be so near as it actually was, and perhaps he hoped to be able, by conferring honor upon Daniel, to appease the wrath of God. End quote. And well, that didn't work. Just a quick note, if you know anything about Hinduism, and Hinduism is different than what we're talking about here, but there's a modern example today in India in Hinduism, which itself is not a unified religion by any means. It's just like a broad category of many different traditions, cults. And when I say cults, I'm using it in like the scholarly sense. Not like what happened in Waco, Texas. I'm talking about portions of a religion that like pick a particular deity that's like their main god, you know. So in Hinduism, there's a lot of that as well. And I actually heard, I can't remember where I heard this, but missionaries that have been in India, I know that somebody said that they were like willing to accept Joseph Smith and then Christ and our religion as like a religion that they would practice or believe alongside with whatever form of Hinduism they were practicing. Like for them, it's not a problem to just like mix and match. So it sounds like it was kind of like the same thing back then with the Babylonians in their religious system. Verse 30, was Babylon really overthrown in one night? Babylon was surrounded by a massive wall over 100 feet thick and 300 feet high. To breach such a wall, even with constant sieging, would take months, and yet there is no hint in Daniel's record that the city was under siege at this time. Could a city of Babylon's size and fortifications be taken in one night? Historical sources other than the Bible indicate that that is exactly what had happened, supporting Daniel's record exactly. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus recorded that, quote, Cyrus had previously caused the Pelacopus, a canal which ran west of the city and carried off the superfluous water of the Euphrates into the lake of Nitocris, to be cleared out in order to turn the river into it, which by this means was rendered so shallow that his soldiers were able to penetrate along its bed into the city. Here we go. Cyrus diverted the water and marched his soldiers under the wall of Babylon, through which the water would normally come. Thus, the Persians marched under the massive walls. Harry Thomas Frank discussed the reasons why the city, even then, surrendered so easily. Quote, Cyrus' orders preceded him to the city. So they got word ahead of time. No revenge was to be taken. The city was to have its normal life restored as quickly as possible. The gods, which Nabonidus had taken from the equally well-treated provincial cities, were to be restored at once. There was, above all, to be no terrorizing of the population. Indeed, Cyrus intended to change some of the policies of Nabonidus. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I don't care that much with this particular story, which had made him objectionable to his subjects. One can imagine the reception Cyrus received when he made his appearance in the capital a few weeks after its capture. He was not a conqueror, he was a liberator. And far from installing a foreign rule over the people, Cyrus personally took the role of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. All right, so now I'm your god, and look, I'm freeing you, which, yeah, in a sense, it's true. In the New Year festival, thereby claiming for himself and his heirs the right to rule the Babylonian Empire by divine designation. Let's see. All right, and then that's all for chapter 5. So that is it. It's important to go through as much as possible. Go through things with a fine-tooth comb, and there's no shame or anything. In fact, it's smart to go back and review things over and over again. We are commanded, actually, or we're counseled by church leaders to read the scriptures frequently and continue to study, and sometimes maybe it's a little bit boring, but maybe the next time it's not, because maybe you realize something. So I just want to say, learning, again, it's a process. It's something that we should be doing our entire lives. President Nelson said that learning is a religious responsibility, and I don't think that he was referring just to college. If you didn't go to college, or even if you did, you should not plateau. You should continue to add to your knowledge and continue to study. If you didn't go to college, you probably need to catch up and do everything that you can to learn all the things that you would in college, or basic things as well, a good variety of topics, as well as things that interest you in particular. So that's why we're doing this, just as a reminder, and it gives us the full context, so we don't just look at narrow verses and then take them out of context, and so we can fully understand what's being communicated. All right, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.